Hey, Adrienne, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. So your Instagram is aj.small. Do we call you
Yes.
AJ or Adrienne? What do your friends call you?
My friends call me AJ.
They call you AJ. Okay,
Yes.
so the podcast listeners are all immediate friends.
Yes, so everybody can call
So
me AJ.
we can all call you AJ. Okay, you're
Yes.
aj.small on the gram. And I know a little bit about you, but we're here to introduce you to the listeners. You're a Memphis, Tennessee hairdresser and educator who focuses on color.
I am.
And if I'm looking at the screen close enough, is that a podcast microphone I see?
It is. And
What
I
are
have
you
a
doing with a
camera.
podcast?
Oh, well, I don't have
microphone?
a podcast, but I do
Okay.
have an online hair color academy. And so I have every type of mic from the lapel mic to the podcast mic. So any of my webinars that I do or any of voiceovers that I have to do for any of my videos, I just like to make sure that the quality of the audio sounds good. So I do have a podcast mic. And then if I have to stand behind or do any hands-on work with them, I have a lapel mic so they can still hear me if I'm doing like actual work. So yeah. I don't have a
Okay.
podcast, so I'm gonna leave that to y'all.
I'll do it. It's a weekly obligation
That's
and
why I don't do it.
and labor of love.
Yes.
And those weeks come quickly. Sometimes I meet another podcaster, especially in the hair industry.
Yeah.
And the list was small and then I got bigger. And now it's back to being a little bit small. And I
Yeah.
like to talk to another one because they're like, oh my God, those weeks come fast.
They do, and that's why I don't do it at all.
Oh,
Just
they do.
recording the curriculum is enough for me, so I don't need to add on to that at all.
And so your color education, your virtual color education is called Hair Color Concepts Academy, everyone.
Yes.
And then you have a teen nonprofit, which we're going to talk about, called the Adrienne Small Foundation. But why don't we just start at the beginning? Where are you from and how did you get into this business?
So I am from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised. I've only lived in one other place my whole life, and that was Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But I literally was the only person in my family or around me that fell in love with hair coming out of the womb. And I tell this story because my mother literally went into labor with me, and instead of going to the hospital, she went to the hair salon to get her hair done. And so
Hilarious.
she got her color, she got a relaxer and a rinse, and she literally broke her water at the hair salon and stayed until I do not need to witness a death on the podcast. Are you okay?
I apologize to the listener. I took a sip of water at the wrong time. When you just said that, I almost spit water all over my screen, my microphone, everything. And instead of spitting it out, it went down the
Tried to
wrong
swallow
pipe.
it.
She went into labor
And
in the
went-
salon.
Yeah, well, no, she went into
Oh, no,
labor
no,
and
sorry,
went to
broke.
the salon. Her water
She went
broke.
her water broke. Yes, that's
At
what
the
I
salon,
meant.
yes.
Sometimes I get confused with the terms, even though I have
Right.
2 kids. So that's what almost had me spitting up my water. So that's how badly she wanted to go to the salon.
Yeah,
And
in labor.
what? Oh my God! So what happened?
So her water broke, and she didn't tell the stylist, and
What?
she kept getting her hair done. And called my dad. My dad is worse because I was born in May, so this is basketball playoff season. And
Oh my
he
God.
told her, "Okay, I'll be there when the game is done." So they were
Shut
both.
up.
They both
Oh
could
my
not
God.
care less about my birth, and I'm their first child, okay? So they could have cared less. So she
Wow.
gets her hair done, she goes to the hospital, and when she tells me that story, I tell her all the time, like I was inhaling the fumes from birth. So it was just meant for me to be in a salon because no one else in my family is in the beauty industry. So that's how I feel like I got into the industry, literally from birth. But
That is
I was
so
the one
funny.
that was doing the braiding at 12. I was braiding everyone's hair. My mom allowed people to come to the house, and I'm 12, making a living, quote unquote, by braiding hair. I did go to college. That was one of the things that my family was very adamant about. You're going to get a degree. And I wasn't allowed to take cosmetology in high school, even though my school did offer it, because they didn't see hair as a career. This was a legit hobby for them. They'd allowed me to do it as a side thing, but you're going to go to college, you're going to get a couple of degrees. And in my family, on my mom's side, you are either in education or you are in the ministry. So you're either a preacher or a teacher. And so I always like to make the joke that my ministry is being behind the chair. My ministry is hair. But then also because I'm an educator, I tell my mom I kind of read the small print of that. It's like, I'm still teaching either way it goes. I might not be in the classroom. I may not be a professor like you all do, but I'm still teaching. So that was just kind of like how it went. And then, of course, in college, I decided that I ended up having my daughter. I got pregnant with my daughter my sophomore year, and I quickly told my mom, like, and this is legit what I said. I said, I'm either going to be a stripper or I'm going to hair school because I need money now. So she was like,
I'm not going to make it through this interview.
You're not. I promise you're not.
I'm going to choke. Yeah.
But it was the truth. And so I told her that because I was on my way to med school. I wanted to be an obstetrician. If I couldn't do hair, I'd deliver babies. And then I got pregnant with my own. And although I did, finish everything, it was still one of those things where cosmetology had my heart. And that
you finished everything even while pregnant and having a young baby?
Yes, I did college online. I moved online for college. And then I did cosmetology school during the day, worked at night. Finished that, and my daughter was born in October, and I was done with cosmetology school by February, and the rest is history. Wow. Yeah.
That's amazing. God, what a great story.
Thank you.
I need a break.
Right, you got to take a couple of deep breaths before we move on to the next topic.
Catch my breath. Okay. So that's amazing. And your mom was probably pissed off about it, right?
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. She was not, it wasn't until she realized what I wanted to do with hair is when she was like, okay, I kind of see where you're going with this. She just did not want me to be in the mom and pop shop from sun up to sundown on my feet doing hair, and that was it. When she realized that education was a really big part of it for me, probably within my third year of doing hair. I've been licensed almost 19 years, and probably within my third year, I became a network educator for Bumble and Bumble. And so I had the opportunity to go back and forth to New York, and I always wanted to be a traveling educator. I never had the intention of staying behind the chair with my craft. And she just still didn't get that. She didn't see the benefit of that. All she saw was, you're just doing hair. And my mom was that person. You're just a hairstylist. Until I became an educator.
Parents often
they just didn't see it. They didn't see it. But now she does. Now she's all for it. She sees everything that I do with it, and she's amazed by the things that can come from this industry. And I think when she was exposed to it, she was a little bit more open-minded about it, and it was just a shift for her in that moment.
Now she sees the preaching and the teaching.
Absolutely.
And she's proud of you, I imagine.
Yes, absolutely.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so you went kind of quickly on what you did after getting out of beauty school. I want a little bit more detail there. So you graduated from beauty school.
Yes.
And you have a baby. And where did you go to work?
So I went straight to a commission salon. So while I was in cosmetology school, I had the opportunity to become a front desk receptionist for this salon. And with that, I saw the front, the back. I saw how everything was ran inside of this salon.
The bad and the ugly.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. I saw all the reports. I saw how the money was coming in and coming out. Like, I loved it. And they gave me the opportunity to get a chair, but I had to go through their apprenticeship program before I could do any of that because, of course, I'm fresh out of school. So they actually recruited me because the cosmetology school that I went to, they recruited from. And it's a family-owned day spa here in Memphis. And so they have about 17 locations. They have 2 beauty schools. So they're a big name. Yeah, they're a big corporate salon. And I stayed with them for about 10 years before I actually got a position with Ted Gibson, and I moved to Fort Lauderdale to work with him.
I know Ted.
Yeah, I moved to Fort Lauderdale to work with him. That lasted about a year, and then I came back. And then when I came back, that's when I went independent. And so that's everything. So I loved being in a commission space But being in Fort Lauderdale just showed me what I did not want. And so when I came back, that same salon welcomed me back, but it was on a booth rental basis at that point. So, so I went commissioned, and I loved it. And I tell anybody straight out of school, apprenticeship and commission base is the absolute way to go, seriously.
Yeah, you got to learn. There's a lot of things to learn. There's structure. There's, because
I
not
was the
everybody
shampoo
knows.
tech. I did the laundry. In between, still studying. They still were giving me tests. I felt like I was in school. I would take clients, but it would be at a cheaper rate. But then I still had, you still got to test out. So do y'all curse on this show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I was the bitch for a while. Like, I had to do the bitch work. So, because
I get it.
Through my bitch work,
No, I get it. There's a lot that can be learned from it.
Yes.
Not everybody knows how to show up on time. I sometimes tell people this because it's just not everybody learns how to show up on time, manage themselves properly to get there on time and prepare yourself and the structure of what you need to do and X and Y and
the
Z.
structure was the biggest thing for me. Being a receptionist showed me the structure of booking, the structure of customer service, the structure of being the front end, you know what I mean, as well as selling retail, because we were also responsible for selling retail. So the customer service end was a really, really big thing that I learned from that. And then, of course, being on time is what you said, as far as like blocking out the correct amount of time and not running over. And of course, presentation, the way you look, because we were required to have a face on. It didn't have to be completely beat, but you had to, look somewhat flawless from that. But it did teach me that structure part was a really big thing, and it has carried on with me this entire time.
So I'm kind of curious, given your background of being behind the desk and then behind the chair of a commission salon, corporate commission salon, that likely had a structure for and an expectation, call it a quota, call it whatever you want, for the number of sales.
Yes.
And then going to work at Ted's Salon in Fort Lauderdale, and then coming back and then going independent with all that experience and everything. What did you learn about selling retail within that corporate structure?
So the biggest thing was to not sound salesy. It was more so about educating your client in the process of actually using the product. And so one thing that they had us do was, I don't like having my clients face in the mirror when I'm actually styling or doing their hair. I like the element of surprise and the element of wow at the end. And so, but one thing that I had to do with them was my products that I was using on them had to be on the station, nothing else. Like, I don't care if it was something that they did not sell, the client couldn't see it, it had to be tucked away. But every single thing that we used that was custom for that particular client had to be sitting on the station where they could see it. And so as I'm picking it up, I'm literally just educating them as I'm using it. I never put it in their face and be like, this is what you need, this is why you need it. I'm literally talking about why you need it and what it is as I'm using it. And typically that in itself sells it, because I don't sound salesy. It's not me forcing it down their throat. And then the front desk just kind of seals the deal. And so when I walk them up with their ticket to get ready to get them checked out, I will go ahead and pull it from the shelf, sit it on the receptionist desk, and then as I'm handing them the ticket, I'm like, these are the products that I used on you today. If you have any questions about it, please let me know, or the receptionist can finish, what's the word I'm looking for? The receptionist can finish letting you know about the product, and then I walk off. And so I've done my job, but then the receptionist, is their job at that point to kind of seal the deal and close the deal. And then that's how we were taught to sell retail in that point.
But by the time you walk away, you've done 99% of it, right?
Literally, all they have to do, because 10 times out of 10, the client will be like, oh, I'm okay on this. The client will kind of cut them off before they even start if they don't want it or they don't need it. And then if it's a client that already has the full package, I may sell them a serum or I may sell them something, but everybody has had to walk out with something. Like every single time they came. And I was in a predominantly white salon. I was the only black stylist that was in there. And so most of my clientele from the first maybe 5 to 6 years was an all white clientele, and so it was easy to sell to them. But when my clientele became more ethnic, more black, and more textured hair, they were like, girl, I don't need all of that. Like, it's I only use it once or twice a week. I still have the last 10 products you gave me 2 months ago. So it was a little bit harder to sell retail once I started moving on to textured hair. But everybody else was like, gimme everything. They were like product holders. They loved it. So it was a little easy in the beginning, but yeah.
Okay, so you came back from Fort Lauderdale. So you came back from Fort Lauderdale.
Get it together.
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Fort Lauderdale. It's funny. I don't say Fort Lauderdale very often.
Ever.
So my mouth is not used to saying Fort Lauderdale.
Right.
Okay.
It's like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale. All right. So you come back from Fort Lauderdale.
Yes.
And by the way, I do want to tell listeners, Donovan just omitted me trying to say Fort Lauderdale correctly. I think it's really funny. So I'm just bitter. I couldn't get Fort Lauderdale. And now, Donovan, you're probably going to leave this in, aren't you? I know what he's going to do. Normally, I ask Donovan to omit certain errors of mine, but I know he's going to leave this in. Anyway, so I can now say Fort Lauderdale better. Mm-hmm. You came back from Fort Lauderdale, back to Memphis, your home, and you became an independent beauty professional, and you worked your way towards education. You always knew that you wanted to be an educator. You said that you started working for Bumble and Bumble as an educator. Mm-hmm. What was your first step? Did you have an idea? Did you think, I'm going to go to a brand? Or did you think, I want to be an independent educator so I could use this product and that product and nobody tells me what to do? What was your mindset?
So at the time, I didn't have a mindset. I'm not going to even lie. It was the only reason I became a network educator for Bumble and Bumble is because our regional rep just so happened to be in the salon, and I was doing my retail. I was talking to the client, educating them on the retail, and she just would typically walk through and she would just kind of like help us with any questions that we had about the product. And she just stood to the side and was just like, I liked how you presented yourself and presented the product to the client. Would you be interested in becoming a network educator? And that's how it ended up happening at that point. Now, when I came back, I had such a hard time with Bumble because the training that they do is intense. And so it wasn't what I expected. And I did it for about 3 years. I was with them for about 3 years. So I learned a lot. But when I came back, I had a very, very strong interest in producing symposiums and shows. And so at that point, I had a symposium called Beyond the Chair Symposium, and it was the professional version of what my nonprofit is for my teenagers. And I got into wanting to create hair show type atmospheres. And so that is where my education kind of set for a minute. And I did that for about 6 years. It wasn't until, I'm trying to think of exactly the point where I was like, I want to teach. Oh, my last year of producing the symposium, I decided to teach a color class. And I loved it so much at that point that I was like, I think I can kind of do this on a full-time scale. Like, everybody loved the way that I taught. I had no other training as far as educating other than what I was doing for Bumble, but it wasn't platform training. It was literally in salon. You teach your stylist. We'll send you to another salon and you teach other stylists on product education. It wasn't anything that wasn't, what's the word I'm looking for? That
Technical.
wasn't technical, but also scripted. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
It wasn't anything that wasn't scripted. And I was trying to get to a point where I didn't have to sound so scripted. And once that happened, I taught that my own little independent class and I loved it. And at the time, I got recruited by Celeb Luxury. And so I was putting their product on Instagram and I was just saying, this is what I do. This is why I look. Same thing that happened with Bumble, just basically giving my experience with the product. And they sent me a message and was like, hey, and at the time, Celeb Luxury was only 6 months old. And they were like, we'd love to fly you out for some training, see if you'd like to do this, do that. Did that. I was with Celeb Luxury for 6 years.
Hold on.
So
that's it? So you
it.
just went on the gram?
I just went on
and talked about the
Instagram.
product.
That's
And
it.
I guess it was a young company, so they're watching their DMs and their
Their
notifications very
mentions and
closely.
things like that. Yep.
They saw you, and they're like, "Ooh, we're gonna take Adrienne. She's great. She's doing a great job of this."
Oh, they had to
That
teach me
was
a
how
lot.
it.
I'm not gonna lie. They had to teach me a lot. They were my first platform company.
Okay.
And I was a baby when it came down to how I presented for an actual company. Because they
Well,
weren't, even though they were a baby company, they were global. And
okay.
with them being global even that soon in their business, they were only 6 months old, it was still something that they had a very strict way of doing things. And I had to learn that. And that was something that my first show was a Cosmoprof show, and I literally cried before I got on stage. Boo-hooed, cried, freaked out.
Because you were nervous. That's
I was
normal.
very nervous, but that was literally how I got into the education part. I just did my own thing, loved it, decided, okay, well, let me start teaching on Instagram, and then a company saw me and was like, hey, this is how we want to roll.
I
And that's
love
how we
it.
roll.
Sometimes you just got to do it.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, Celeb Lux, by the way, I I have bleached hair right now, but before I bleached it, I just kind of had my gray white sort of thing going on, and I love Celeb Lux color depositing shampoos.
Their
and
color
conditioners.
shampoos, yes, the color wash.
I think they're great. They only
That-
last like 2-3 days. It's perfect.
I teach about them a lot, even though I'm no longer with the brand or the company. I'm still an avid user. My
Yeah.
back bar has every color, every tone. My students are going to know about it from beginning to end. I still am a very big rah-rah cheerleader for Celeb Luxury. So, yeah.
I love it. I did the pink once. I wanted to do for 4th of July, red, white, and blue. The white, though I took like a white part of my hair, which I've got a couple white sections. And then I did blue and red on the other sections.
Wow.
And the red took forever to come out. The blue.
That's what I use, yeah.
Yeah. So Adrienne's got red in her hair right now. But yeah, the red took forever to come out. Actually, you know what? It was pink. Because I thought about this too late, and I didn't have red in my shower. I had pink, and so the pink was in there forever.
So you had pink, white, and blue for 4th of July?
Yeah, I did. I did pink, white, and blue. I know. It's embarrassing.
That's hilarious.
But I just told everybody it was red, and then I
faded
didn't know what I
red,
was
it
doing.
faded.
Exactly. It faded pink. Okay, so you're with Celeb Lux. Now, when you were with them, because the listeners are thinking, is that all it takes? I just need to go on there and
No, that's not. No,
Okay.
that's not.
All right. So
It can happen because it happened with me
yeah.
twice. So
It
it can.
Right. It happened with you twice. So when you're with Celeb Lux, well, there's the getting the gig, and then there's the what does the gig look like? So the getting the gig, you got it twice. Is that luck of the draw, or like what was special about what you did? In other words, what advice can we give to the listeners? You know, maybe I don't know, have things changed, or do you just need to focus on a younger company? Like what advice do you have for the listeners?
Not necessarily. I think it depends on what you're trying to do, because a lot of companies will probably have tiers as to what their educator not necessarily looks like, but what they're capable of doing. So they may have regional educators, they may have platform artists, they may have artistic educators. Celeb Luxury had ambassadors as well. I started off as an ambassador before I became an actual educator, where they would just send product, and it was basically kind of influencer type thing.
Right, you're not paid.
You're paid per post, and so the thing, it's just a matter of if they choose your post. You know what I mean? So like if they don't pick your post, because that's how they started. If they didn't pick your post, you didn't get paid, but you still were required to produce the content. So you would be
Wait a second.
contracted. Yeah,
Pick it what to repost?
to post it on their page. So if they felt as though it was,
Good
I
enough.
guess, good enough, or it fit their
strategy.
Their strategy, then they would post it. But the thing with Celeb is that they were very vivid and pastel-y, and my clientele was not. And so their gem light line was where I lived the most. And so it didn't get posted as much, even though it was just as good, because their timeline and their audience was the vivid audience. And so I was the blondes, the reds, the brunettes, the coppers. That was my clientele, still is my clientele. And so I would have to literally pull models to get the vivids in order to get posted. But that's when I ended up moving over to the education side, because at that point I was over ambassadoring as an ambassador. And that's when I kind of put myself out there and I told them, hey, this is what I prefer to do. This is what I like to do. And I went through the training and they were like, okay, cool. We know what to do with you now. And then that's how I became one of their global artistic educators.
You didn't want to ambass anymore.
No, I was over it.
No more ambassing. So, but I'm really curious. So you might post five pieces of content on your gram.
Well, no, you would do it and then send it to them. You couldn't post it until you sent it to them, and they went through it and approved it and did.
And you get paid how much if they chose one? What would you get?
$50.
$50, a whopping
but that was
$50.
that was also like 8 years ago. It's been a long time.
Sure, and
I've had a whole kid since then, so
that's an entire child in the past.
That is 6 years old now, so it was a very long time ago. So it may have changed since then.
Yes. It may have changed, and of course, it's going to be different by the company.
Exactly.
But I think it's good for the listeners to know, just kind of, I like to give them ideas of how it works behind the scenes.
Yes.
All right. So you started educating for them, and then then what was that? Like a day rate?
So you'd have a prep day rate. So the prep day was one thing. The actual show day was a totally different price. But yes, it was definitely a day rate. And then most brands, depending on what tier you're on as an educator, will pay for travel, lodging, and you may get a stipend as far as food is concerned.
Okay.
And they did all of that. So most brands that I have worked for do that. Right now, I am an educator for Blonde Solutions, and they do that. So it's one of those things where you asked me earlier too, and I meant to go back to this, I'm sorry, but you were like, what does it take? And a lot of times my biggest thing is just me being myself. I'm extremely authentic. I have not done anything that, one, I did not want to do, and two, that I was not comfortable doing. I am very much so coachable. So being open to learning their dialect, being open to learning their cadence and the way that they like to teach, because I'm very Southern. So I have to figure out my draw and learn my draw, but at the same time, it's still me. But I have to learn that in education, and especially in platform work, because I wanted to really, really get on big stages and go to all the shows and be on main stages, that there's a certain appearance that and a certain personality that brands look for. And if you don't have that, they don't care how authentic and how good you are. They're going to move on to the person that has that. And then a lot of brands are open to working with you to get you to where they would like for you to be. And those are brands that I love too. So it just really depends on the brand, like you said, like what they're looking for and how they go about choosing who their educators are.
Coachable, I think, is very important.
You have to be coachable.
In other words, you can't be too sensitive about when they say, don't wear those shoes, or the way that you do this, the way that you do that, let's do it differently, right?
Yeah.
Can you be sensitive about that kind of stuff? Right.
And what's crazy is I'm also a collaborative artist for Texture versus Race, and Kia when I say the biggest reason I'm coachable, because Kia does not play, but she presents it in a way to where it's loving, but also we got to get to it, and this is how we're going to get to it. And in order for us to stand out, this is what it's got to look like. So she's very adamant about the presentation while also allowing us to be us. And so she's the one that helped me not be in my feelings, to be honest with you, because I do get in my, as coachable as I am, I'm super sensitive. But Kia, she kind of helped me build that thick skin because she knew where I was trying to go. And because she has the relationships with the brands and she knows what they're looking for, it was one of those things where she kind of, again, coached us through how to get there.
Got it. I love that.
Yeah.
She taught you how to not take offense to certain things.
Like, for real.
She probably explained the importance of certain things and tied it to kind of the goal, the whole reason why you're there.
Yes.
It's not about your feelings.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, she knows her stuff for sure.
She does.
No, that's fantastic. Okay, so are you behind the chair at all today?
Today I was, but I was doing model work. I retired technically in 2022, December of 2022. So it's been 2 years. And I would only take a client for content purposes and if I need to film for my online academy. And so I just got back behind the chair technically about 2 months ago. But it's still, it's not on a set schedule basis, if that makes sense. It's one of those things where I see that I need the content. I don't like teaching on mannequins. I prefer that all of the education that my students see is on actual real scenarios. And so I may do simple techniques on a mannequin, but a lot of times a client is going to come in where a corrective is going to need to be done, and they need to know how to tackle that, and I can't do that on a mannequin. So I started taking clients for that reason, but it wasn't on a free basis either. It's like I still need to get paid for it. And then once I started working with brands and brands started sending me product, I had to have a certain way to produce the content that they were asking for. So I had to start taking clients again. But it's not on a set schedule basis at all.
Right, not a typical client. They're not typical clients, right?
And then I only do color. So if I'm taking a client, it's absolutely a color client. It's not going to be a shampoo style or anything like that unless I'm maintaining a specific color client and it's somebody that's been with me for 10 years and they still get their color done with me, then I will do their treatments and trims and things like that. But other than that, color only.
And I imagine they know that you're going to film and they know what you're doing.
Yes. So every time, so I still have a booking site and I have, sorry, I saw my hair in the mic. I still have a booking site and there are the policies and procedures also have a video and picture release form in it. And so they know that either I'm filming or there's going to be a student shadowing me. So at any point, it's always done for educational purposes. And so you can either come or you don't. Because at some point, filming is required or student shadowing is required in order to receive that appointment, especially since I'm retired.
And how much longer does that take for your client dash model?
It doesn't take any longer because it used to. I'm going to say that now.
Yeah.
But I figured out how I have the cameras. And so between my actual camera, I have 2 phones. I can get my angles the way that I need to for the online academy. But for social media, it's just, I only need kind of like B-roll. You know what I mean? It's like I don't necessarily have to record the entire thing. There aren't certain angles that I'm looking for. But when a student is shadowing, they understand that when they come to shadow, this is still a typical salon day. It's fast paced. This is not a stop and ask questions. You're going to ask questions and I'm going to keep moving as I'm going so that I'm not taking away too much time from my client. So I still like to have it set up as a typical salon day. So that my students still see it as a typical salon day and not necessarily as a class. A lot of times if I don't do an in-person shadow day, I'll do it virtually and I have a big TV on my wall and I'll just connect my computer to it and my students can virtually watch me in a typical salon day. And then that way I can teach as I go and they're still learning if they can't come into the salon because a lot of my students are out of town. So I kind of have different ways that I play it up. But again, my students understand that it's going to be fast paced. You can ask the questions, but I'm not stopping because my max is 6 hours and nobody wants to sit on a class for 6 hours. And if
Right.
I'm doing a corrective color, a lot of them will be in and out, but of the virtual room, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily something where we're literally sitting on a computer all day long. We're not doing that.
Right. Very interesting. And so I'm seeing in your background a studio looks really nice. You got
Thank
your
you.
shampoo unit. You've got a cabinet with your products on it. You've got some
Yes.
things on the wall.
The
Yeah,
licenses.
you got your licenses on the wall, and yeah, it's nice.
And I'm
It looks great.
also a licensed educator. So I did that too because I wanted to make sure that I knew how to present to different learning styles. And so I had already been teaching my own way, but becoming a platform artist and teaching for brands, they have a certain way of teaching. But I learned real quick when I got into a trade show classroom that everybody doesn't learn the same way. And so I had to figure out how I was going to go about maneuvering that. And so I did go back to get my instructor's license. So I went back to quote unquote cosmetology school and I got my instructor's license, and I've had that for about 3 years now.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure I was even aware that there is an instructor's license.
It's typically for you if you want to teach in a cosmetology school.
Okay.
And I never ever want to do that. So I did it for the structure of educating. That was the only reason that I did it. So of course, it's licensed by the state of Tennessee. I'm pretty sure just about every state has it. But most of the time when people get it, they're going to teach inside of a school, a cosmetology school, because you have to have that in order to teach in a
Got
cosmetology
it.
school. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. And the name of your virtual education is Hair Color Concepts Academy.
Yes.
And that's what it is on Instagram.
Yes.
And there's a website too, I assume?
It's going to be haircolorconceptsacademy.com.
There you go. And you go on there, and there's various ways to get what you're putting out.
Yes.
And it's pretty cool as I'm listening to what you're saying. Going back to something I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you have a teen nonprofit, the Adrienne Small Foundation, and
Yes.
you talked about how you based your hair symposiums off of what you're doing for that nonprofit. So I'm dying to know. I've been very patient. And here we are. I'm asking you,
Yes.
what symposiums were you doing?
So it was called Beyond the Chair Symposium, and it was set up as a 3-day event. And so during those 3 days, I would invite, I was getting ready to say I would bring in, but I wasn't paying anybody's way to get here. But I would invite professional stylists that were masters in their craft to teach classes. So it was basically set up like a mini version of the trade shows. So I loved trade shows and I wanted to be able to produce my own, but it was specifically for stylists in Memphis. Memphis didn't have anything like that. And so I wanted to be the one to produce, a mini version of it and then just kind of like watch it grow into something really big. And so I started with just taking 30 stylists at a time. We had about 5 classes. You chose your class, and then you would take 2 classes a day. They were hands-on. It would probably be about 3 to 4 hours of a class, and then you would swap after lunch. At the end of the weekend, we had what I call Meet the Masterminds, and it was kind of like my version of a talk show. But at the same time, I was bringing in people kind of like panels, how they do at trade shows, where they do the panels on stage, but we did it in a more intimate way. And then I had vendors and things of that nature. So it was specifically made to be on a smaller scale because I like intimate events so that we can do more, we can get more into each other, get more into what you're learning. And I did that for 6 years, but it did not take off or wasn't appreciated. I say this all the time. It was not as appreciated because here in Memphis, if a celebrity stylist is not attached to it, or if a celebrity in itself is not attached to it, it wasn't necessarily worth it. They like to go to Atlanta and see what Atlanta has, or go to California. But if it's here and the people that we have here are just as talented, they just aren't seen. Why do you feel like you can't learn from them as well when they can teach you just as well as somebody that lives in Atlanta or somebody that's on the big main stage for another show? And so my idea was to just kind of like help my own peers and give them the platform, and then that's what the symposium was. Well, what happened with that is because once people I started realizing it wasn't necessarily taking the way that I wanted it to, as far as getting sponsorships and things like that. It was very hard. So a lot of this was my own money. And 6 years in, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I was
very expensive,
a
tremendous amount of work,
a lot of work, and I was doing it by
Yes.
myself because I was so passionate about it. I just loved it so much. But I ended up getting invited into a career day at one of our schools. We have a performing arts school here that has a cosmetology program, and within that day I was talking to about 300 students. I had 300 girls because I had the flyers and I only made 300 of them, and they were all gone by the end of the day. And that's how I realized I saw and talked to 300 girls. I was telling them about the symposium, and they were like, well, we want to come and we want to come. And I'm like, well, it's kind of for professionals, but let me see if I can figure something out for just teenagers. And that's how I ended up doing my nonprofit for teens. I just was like, I did it one time, and I looked up and I was like, okay, this is something. God is like, this is where I really want you to pivot to. And I said, okay, cool, let's do it. And I just stopped doing the one for professionals.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, what happens at that one?
It just went away. What do you mean, the one for my teen girls?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's still here. So it's called the Girlpreneur Beauty Camp. And so my symposium went from 3 days for professionals to now a 5-day beauty camp for teen girls ages 13 through 19 who are interested in any aspect of the beauty industry. The difference, though, is that we don't only focus on hair. If it's beauty related, we offer hands-on classes at that camp. But then at the end of the camp, they have this entire pitch competition. And during the pitch competition, because we also have a business workshop day. And so with the business workshop day, they learn how to pitch. They learn about financing. They learn about social media content. If it's business related, we do it on that day. But then we also teach them how to get financing and capital for their businesses. And then they pitch all of that, and everything they learned that week. They have 2 minutes to pitch to us, whether it's a business, a product, because they also make products. We have a product development class. They pitch all of this to us, and we give away beauty school scholarships at the end of the week. And so so it kind of like became more impactful by being able to do it for teens versus doing it for beauty professionals.
And so these are teens who want to have a career in the beauty industry.
Yes, whether it's hair, nails, makeup, aesthetics, beauty related, we offer it.
Very fascinating. I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, and we are going on year 7. This year was year 6, so next year will be year 7.
You're going on year 7. Have you been able to get sponsors for that?
Yes, and it's now. Let me say this. Financial sponsors, we're still working on.
Okay.
People, like, it's very hard to get money, but people will give us products all day long. Pivot Point is a huge sponsor for us. They have sponsored us since day one. So whether it's the tools or the mannequin heads, because we use textured mannequins for the camp every year, they are always a very, very big consistent sponsor for us. We've been sponsored by Wella. We've been sponsored by Alpha Park. So we've had big names that have graciously given us more than enough product to be able to execute the classes that they do, because like I said, we have everything is hands-on. And so I try my best, although it is a cost for the girls to come, I try my best to keep them from having to purchase all of the different tools and things that they need for each class that they take. So we rely heavily on sponsorships for sure.
Oh, that's super cool. Do you have any hair horror stories?
I do. My second year licensed in that corporate salon, and this also is a testament to the beauty of working in a corporate salon, because you have their corporate lawyers that have your back. And so I had this one client. She came in and she had long jet black hair, and she wanted, and this was at the time where this was a thing, but she wanted blonde and red highlights in her jet black hair. And now I wouldn't dare, because first of all, that's atrocious. But then I was like, cool, let's do it. And the cosmetology school that I went to, I didn't learn a lot of color at all. Again, I was only black girl, and they sent me all the roller sets. And so to this day, I can't stand a roller set. And so, and so color was not my strong point in cosmetology school, or really up until about 6 years into my career. But that particular day, I relied on my peers and my colleagues to kind of guide me through this particular client and what she wanted. So I'm like, cool. At the time, the salon was a Wella salon, and they had Magma. So, Magma is like lift and tone and things like that. So I went and got the blonde Magma, and I went and got the red Magma. I'm like, I can knock this red out just by, putting the Magma on, and it'll lift and tone. I don't have to do any additional toning after. Jet black hair. I go to the back. You know how we go to the back and talk to our girls and be like, hey, listen, go look at the client real quick and tell me what I need to do.
Don't let her know that.
Don't let her know. Just walk by
real.
Just walk by real quick and just let her, just look. And so they came to the back and they were like, yeah, so you're going to need to do Magma with 40 volume, and this is how you're going to get it done. I'm like, cool. I'm trusting it, not knowing that 40 volume is death on anybody's hair, especially in a foil. So I get there, I mixing everything up. I do it. I finish her foil. One of the girls come by and she was like, you're going to have to put her under the dryer. I'm like, okay, cool. I put her under the dryer. She's like, because it's a lot of black and it's not going to get blonde if you don't put her under the dryer. Mind you, dryer, foil, 40 volume. It's a recipe for disaster. And so the second, Eric, I promise you, the second I put her under the dryer, I pull it down, I turn it on. Within 2 or 3 minutes, it's smoke coming out of the dryer. It's smoke coming out of the dryer. And I'm like, good God, what is that? Like, why is her hair smoking? And she's sleeping. So she's like taking a nap. Her eyes are closed.
No.
Not seeing anything. So I come get her. I'm like, hey, let's get your shampoo. Yeah. I was like, let me get your shampoo real quick. She's like, okay, cool, no problem. But that was fast. I get her to the bowl, and as I'm pulling, it's literally like melts. It's like mush. Whatever was in that foil came out. And she literally had like that much hair in her head. So less than an inch, every piece of foil that I had. So now she's got all these spaces in her head. So I have to tell her, because there's no way that I'm going to be able to camouflage that with anybody's haircut. So I have to tell her. She looks at me and I'm just dying inside because I know she's going to be extremely upset and pissed and ready to cuss me out. And she was so excited because it gave her a reason to cut her hair off.
Shut up.
It gave her a reason to shave her head. She had been wanting to shave her head and cut her hair to like Sinead O'Connor. I think that's who it was. Who had like the really cute, like super flat, but she was Sinead O'Connor. She had that. She wanted that look, but she had husband that was like death if you cut your hair. Like even a trim he's ready to fight. So I get excited because I'm like, cool, I can just put a jet black color back on your hair, cut it all off, we're good to go. She was fine. The second her husband comes to pick her up, he's blasting through the salon. He's yelling, screaming. He's coming at me, ready to choke me out because I cut his wife's hair.
Jeez, this doesn't sound like a very good relationship.
Exactly. So he's pissed at her. He's pissed at me. He's calling his lawyer. He's calling corporate. He's ready to sue me because she didn't even tell him that I melted her hair off. He's just mad at the haircut itself. So he would have had every reason to be upset about me melting her hair off. But he's just like, no, you cut her hair. So now I'm about to cut you. So that was like the most horrifying thing that I had ever gone through. But again, corporate and their corporate lawyers handled it. So I never had to deal with any of that.
Well, I didn't see that coming.
Nobody ever does when I tell this story.
I've heard the first part of that horror story maybe 150 times.
Yeah, we all go through it.
But I don't think any client was ever excited when they realized.
She was just like, this gives me an excuse to cut my hair off because she had been dying to cut her hair off.
That's amazing. Well, Adrienne, thank you so much. It was great talking to you. And
thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm saying thank you on behalf of the listeners. And I think it's great things that you're doing, and very excited about what you got going.
Thank you so much.
Listeners, check her out, aj.small on the gram, and her educational platform, Hair Color Concepts Academy on the gram.
Mm-hmm. And the nonprofit is the Adrienne Smile Foundation on Instagram too.
There you go.